Good evening, everyone. Phra Nicholas Thanissaro coming to you today from London in the UK. And this is 1 full year now that we have been doing these full moon meditations here in Europe. So thank you very much, Natalie, for the glowing introduction, and to Wendy for the soothing exercise session. I'm not sure about everyone here in person. You look fairly familiar, but for the benefit of anyone online who's maybe new to meditation today, I will go quickly through the meditation technique so that we can join in and have a productive meditation in case you're new today. So meditation is something that has been offered to us as an antidote for what tends to happen in our modern daily lives, which is that we tend to get hijacked in our minds by all the busy things going on around us, sometimes to the point that it's very hard to bring our mind back to where it needs to be in order to discover peace and balance in life. So meditation is a way in which we can relocate our scattered mind back to a place within ourselves. There are many ways to practice meditation. One of the ones which you may have heard of before is breathing meditation, and meditation on breathing would mean putting a focus of your attention on your breath, and as your breath goes in and out, then your mind would follow the movement of the breath. But an even simpler way to meditate which doesn't involve a moving target, would be just to place your mind somewhere inside the body in one place that feels calm and comfortable for you. And one place that is particularly effective for this is right down at the abdomen, in our solar plexus, where you would keep your mind down at the center of your stomach, or at a place which feels comfortable for you. And the way to keep the mind in place is to imagine something bright inside you. Today being the full moon day, you might like to imagine the full moon shining brightly as if you see it in the center of your stomach, or it could be a bright sun or a star or a diamond instead, whatever feels comfortable for you. Generally, the more rounded and more bright the object is, the more effective it will be. If your mind wanders away from this point, then you just bring it back again each time. Generally, in any meditation, we start with 5 minutes of relaxation of our body, because if our body is not relaxed or if we're not sitting comfortably, then often it's hard to concentrate. So we spend a few moments of the practice in the beginning to make sure our body is comfortable first of all. After that, we smooth and unburden our state of mind. It's known as relaxing the mind for the next 5 minutes of the practice, as a way to set the mood for the meditation ahead. And only then do we do the exercise, bringing our mind to the center of our body and keeping it there with a soft and gentle attention. Sometimes we have thoughts that come up in the mind, and generally we can get away with ignoring the thoughts as a way to reduce the number of thoughts in the mind. But for those who have more than your average number of thoughts in the mind, you may find it useful to make use of what's known as a mantra. So hearing the sound of words repeatedly in the mind over and over again, like a resonant sound coming from the center of yourself. And traditionally, we use the words Samma Arahang. In the Dhamma tradition, you'd hear those words coming up repeatedly over and over again as a sort of thought blocker in the mind. And if your mind settles down, then at that point you can let go of the mantra and just focus gently at the center of yourself. Also, in today's meditation, we, after lighting our candles, which is about halfway through the practice, we will spread loving kindness. And the way we do that is to take whatever has built up in our meditation as a result of our meditation so far, and allow it to spread outwards from the center of our body, initially to the whole of our body, and afterwards around ourselves and further outwards into the world, until we can cover the whole of the world with the brightness or feeling of well-being that comes from inside. So we're going to sit for meditation now for about 45 minutes. So if you'd like to get yourself comfortable for that, and also make sure that you have your candle lantern or even LED lamp close by you, so that you can light it halfway through the practice. And if you are following from home, then you might like to prepare a candle or something to light when we come to that part of the practice. But I'll tell you when, and gently it will be about halfway through the meditation today. So if you'd like to settle down for some meditation now, and the theme of the meditation today is taming the wild horse. So we start by gently adopting a posture that is comfortable for us in meditation. A posture by which our heart and mind can really relax alongside our body, while picking up on feelings of inner ease, softness, and peace. When you're ready, close your eyes very gently. And we can just start to release the tension from all the habitual places where tension builds up in our body. Initially, in every meditation, we need to structure our practice, perhaps just for the first 10 minutes or so, to make a clean break from our usual preoccupations, while setting the mood for the meditation ahead. So in this regard, you can start by slowly taking a deep breath in before exhaling, just feeling the soft touch of the breath on your lips. And repeating this a couple more times. Each time letting your body settle a little bit further into the moment. And letting your breath flow naturally as you feel its ebb and flow. Release any tension or lightness or tightness still gripping your head or your face. And relax yourself from your shoulders down through your chest and your belly. And you can let yourself really relax into the seat or the cushions on which you're sitting. You generally want to err on the side of being too relaxed when you're preparing for the meditation ahead. And turning your attention now to relaxing the mind. You can start to become increasingly attuned to the feelings inside you. If at any point when you're meditating you start to feel a sense of not quite being comfortable, then make any changes you need by acknowledging or noticing the mood changes. And just taking a few moments to come inside yourself to an inner place of relaxation. And at this point in our practice, there's no need for us to reach for anything or expect anything. And most definitely not being hard on yourself in any way. You can just let go right from the start of any sense of self-reproach and let your practice come from a place of kindness and compassion. As we simply take a few moments of our time to train the mind, rehabituate the mind, redirect the mind, essentially to the present moment of our experience, our direct experience of the here and now. So rather than the place where we're habitually caught up in concepts, ideas or daydreams, plans for the future, or stories of our past, and although we don't want to be too heavy-handed, we might need to accept that out of unfamiliarity, we may start out from a place where we feel slightly uncomfortable, agitated or restless when we first sit down to meditate. But before long, that unfamiliarity will gradually disappear. If you've been busy doing other things right before the meditation, or if you've simply been thinking a lot, then the mind is unlikely to calm down immediately. It will have built up a certain amount of momentum. It takes a few moments to settle down again. And it's only natural to experience that movement of mind, physically as well as mentally. So remember the idea of giving the mind space and allowing it to come to a natural place of rest in its own time. Rather than leaning forward into the future, we continue to settle back. And as our nervous system begins to settle, with a nice sense of a decluttered life, with nowhere to be, nothing to do, and no one to be. So really withdrawing the mind away from the future and the past, away from worries or preoccupations with significant others in your life, as we gradually peel the mind away from any moods that might make us feel uncomfortable. And there's so many different moods that we can feel as we're meditating. Sometimes we may feel bored or longing or annoyance. But if we observe the feeling without reacting to it, simply by giving it space, without trying to push it out of our awareness, at the same time we can make space for something more positive. So the practice is one of being with this one unique moment of our life, one moment at a time, and letting ourselves wholeheartedly be here with the vitality of the body and the breath. And we treat any pleasant or unpleasant feelings arising in the mind, any moods, bodily sensations, sounds, or visual imagery with perfect equanimity, just accepting them all for now. And when we feel we've relaxed ourselves both in body and in mind, we breathe in slowly and make a mental note of the turning point of the breath inside the stomach. Once we've taken note, from here on in we can just forget about the breath. Because the turning point of the breath in your stomach is the center of the body. It's the place where we're going to rest the focus of our attention. It's a place right here in the center of the stomach. Although in practice, it doesn't really matter where exactly we place our mind at this stage. But once our mind becomes calm and refined enough, the mind will begin to zero in on the center of the body all by itself. When the mind begins to settle at that point, you'll start to feel that something is almost alive at the center of the body. But for the time being, we just rest the mind gently in the general area of the center of the stomach, at the point we feel most comfortable with. The way you place the mind at the center of the body should be as gentle as if you were floating a needle on the surface of some water, creating not one single ripple on the surface of that water, while at the same time not letting the needle sink. It's the same sort of gentleness we need when we are placing the mind gently at the center of the body, almost with a feather-light touch. And to help to keep the mind in place, to act as an anchor, we can picture some sort of bright object in the mind. Maybe something like the sun shining, the same sort of sun you might see in the distance if you're walking at the seaside and saw the sun on the horizon, shining bright, clear and round. And we visualize without making any effort, because it's our natural ability, an ability of the mind to perceive things internally. Whatever we think of, then that picture will arise for us in the mind. And that's the way we visualize the inner object, whether it be a sun shining, a full moon, a shining star, or perhaps a diamond sparkling brightly. We continue to rest our awareness with whatever inner object we can see the whole of the time. If thoughts interrupt our meditation, we do our best to ignore them, rather than elaborate on them. If we find the mind is plagued by thoughts, find our brain is like a proverbial hamster wheel, then we might find it useful to make use of a traditional mantra, such as hearing the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up from the center of our body, over and over again. until the mind starts to gain independence from those thoughts, until the spaces between the thoughts start to last longer than the thoughts themselves. And we should bear in mind that just because we sit for meditation for a few minutes each day, it doesn't mean that we'll immediately master the mind or be able to turn the corner on our old bad habits. It's not to say that you won't sometimes experience those aha moments when you realize what it is you've been doing. But the process will likely be a gradual one, where each day you enter the zone a little bit more easily, with a little bit more clarity. And in doing so, you'll manage to avoid many of the habitual reactions that stress you out. This is what it means to have awareness, to see the mind with absolute clarity. There are those who are new to meditation who often make the mistake of searching for some sort of inner experience or wanting to be rewarded with some sign of progress or fruition. But peace of mind or insight will always be elusive if we're struggling to find it. If we can bring a real sense of genuine captivation and curiosity to our meditation, then it doesn't really matter what those qualities are. It's because when they become a part of the meditation, a part of that which is observed, a quality that can be described as gentle curiosity, when this becomes part of your approach to meditation, you'll notice that the mind feels very open. And the idea of approaching meditation with a gentle curiosity implies a sense of soft, open and patient interest. It's perhaps the way you might quietly watch a wild animal from a hidden place, without letting on that you're there. Because you're so captivated and engaged, and you're 100% focused on what you're watching, while at the same time not trying to influence the result. You merely remain aware of the immediacy of the moment, free from impatience, but content just to watch the mind as it is. The thing to remember about clarity is that when something in the mind needs to become clear, then it will naturally become clear. Meditation isn't about rooting around in the recesses of the mind, trying to dig up old memories, or getting caught up in analysis, or trying to make sense of it all. But clarity will arise on its own and in its own time and in its own way. Sometimes clarity will mean becoming more aware of the thinking process. At other times the awareness may shift to emotions or physical sensations. But whatever happens and whatever you become more aware of, allow it to happen naturally. So instead of resisting it because it's unpleasant or uncomfortable, or trying to hasten its departure by delving into analysis, just allow it to happen in its own way and at its own pace. We continue in this way lightly and gently, just for a few more moments now in silence, each to our own practice, for for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the appropriate time. You notice your mind wandering off onto other things each time you realize. Simply bring your attention back again to the center of the body as before. But when you bring the attention back to the center, do so gently with respect for yourself and respect for the stability of your mind. When different feelings or bodily experience arise in your practice, whether it be warmth or tension or tingling in the body, we can observe that direct experience, just watching it and allowing for it. Because ultimately it's the awareness that matters. Whatever is actually happening internally and externally in the present moment, even if it's extraneous sounds We can just hear them as if the sound originates from the center of our body. If the mind wanders away or daydreams, we just become aware of the mind wandering and bring it back again to the center without making a fuss. And in such situations, it may be useful to remind ourselves of the analogy of taming a wild horse. Instead of rushing or forcing your mind to obey, imagine a wild horse on the other end of a slack rope that you're holding in your hand. You give the horse all the space it needs, and in the beginning it will buck and strain with all its might. But eventually, if you don't let go of the rope, it will tire itself out and calm down. At this point, since the horse doesn't feel as if it's trapped or pinned down in any way, while it still runs free in the field, you just keep a watchful eye on it, holding on loosely to the end of the rope. But as time goes on, you gradually shorten the rope. And if you do this gently enough with a wild horse, it won't even notice the difference. It will feel as though it still has all the space it needs. So little by little we coax the horse closer, all the while keeping an eye on it, but giving it enough space for it to feel at ease and not too nervous. In the same way, we charm the mind back to the center of the body until it feels captivated just to stay at the center. So we continue in this way, gently training the wild horse of our mind, lightly and gently, until we come to the time for some loving kindness meditation. As we return to our seats, we gather together all the brightness from illuminating the candles back into our minds, into our mind's eye at the center of our body, re-establishing a sense of balance, equilibrium, and brightness within ourselves. Almost like the brightness that we have put out there into the world has a corresponding brightness within ourselves at the center of our body. Once the mind has absorbed the source of pure energy, we now imagine that that energy radiates outwards from the center in all directions. We gently visualize the pure energy taking the form of a crystal light which grows out, becoming larger from the center of our body to pervade every last cell of our own body, or reaching out beyond that to our whole family, our neighborhood, and everyone in the world, no matter who they may be. We emanate a positive intention along with that expansion of pure energy, full of love and compassion towards all. For those who are suffering, may they be free from sadness and pain. For those who are already happy, may they be happier still. So you might imagine that we emanate a positive intention to everyone in our country, neighboring countries, across entire continents, the entire globe, and beyond that still. Be well and happy, and dwell in peace. Even in the darkest of nights, the starlight can shine through. Even troubled times can have a silver lining. Even times of crisis can bring forth resilience and growth. Even when things around us have gone awry, yet our mind can re-engage with happiness through the practice of meditation. In the same way, by spreading our loving kindness, it's a way of reaching out to all human lives with a sense of empathy towards one another, an energy free from stress or anxiety, free from worry or irritation, free from sickness or danger. And we can also share this peace energy for the benefit of our ancestors, family members, and friends, whether they are still with us or whether they have already passed, with a wish that they all may feel cleansed by hope and joy, while being sheltered against sadness, sickness, sorrow, or danger. May all sentient beings be free from distress, and may the growing stream of pure energy dispel any harmful elements from all sentient beings on the planet, as if the whole of our earth were being refined and made pure and crystal clear, leaving only purity and quality, protecting against sickness and distress. as we lead the world into a new era of integrity that emerges from a pure energy, freedom from harm or aggression, an energy that protects the world, bringing only good things, bringing only a sense of peace and harmony for all. So we sit for a few more moments in silence, making wishes for ourselves or others, as we spread loving kindness for a few more moments now in silence. Be Buddha Palapata Pacheka Nanchayam Balang Arahanta Nanchate Chena Arakam Bandami Sapaso Sapaputhanupavena Sapadhammanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Sathasoti Bhavanto Te. If you would like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So this evening marks us coming full circle in our celebration of full moon meditations here in Europe, as 1 full year that we have been keeping up this tradition, because we started out on the 21st of September of last year. And the moon that we have returned to today is the harvest moon, which is the closest full moon to the autumn equinox. And that's the time when the sun is directly above the Earth's equator, and the day and night are of equal length. So the actual equinox this year is the 22nd of September, but it's a time for this full moon when the crops are gathered, generally at the end of the summer. So it marks the end of the summer season. And generally for the harvest moon it appears particularly bright rises early and lets the farmers continue harvesting well into the night. Sometimes it's called the barley moon, and it's not just something for a harvest festival, it's also something that is celebrated around the world because of the size and the prominence of the moon. Don't know if you've seen these before. I know Thai people like the ones with durian inside, yes, or little eggs inside. But the harvest moon kicks off several festivals and traditions around the world, mostly to do with the autumn equinox again, because it's a bright and a big full moon. So in Southeast Asia, then they have, in Chinese and Korean cultures, are usually the biggest celebrators of this particular one. The moon festival, Zongkyuji, the 15th day of the 8th moon of the lunar month in China, with the mooncakes, moon gazing, family reunions, and traditional round pastries with sweet fillings. And they're often cut into equal pieces, equal to the number of family members as well. In Korea, they have a similar festival called Chuseok, celebrated as a national holiday. And people travel to their ancestral and parental homes, where they eat traditional sweets called songpyeong, play games and pay homage to the elders and ancestors. Sometimes the harvest moon is also known as the corn moon, and it's traditionally symbolic of a new beginning after hard work and dedication. And sometimes it may seem like a regular full moon, but if you look closely, it will have an orangey sort of hue to it. And I had an update from Bangladesh last time that this moon also is known as Madhu Purnima. Yes, celebrated by Buddhists in Barwas and the Chakmas of Chittagong, and also the Mon people of Thailand. And it's called Madhu Purnima, or the honey full moon. And it commemorates the offering of honey by a monkey to the Buddha. Yes, I think you heard that right. During his 10th rains retreat, the Buddha underwent a disagreement in his monastic community. And the way for him to sort out that disagreement, or between the quarreling factions of his disciples, was to withdraw by himself into the forest and leave them to it, basically, until they started to come to their senses. And because he was alone in the forest, then there was no one to look after him, except for a monkey and an elephant. And the forest is called the Parilayaka forest, and the elephant brought him fruit, and the monkey brought him a honeycomb. And the monkey was so excited by being able to do something to help the Buddha, and the Buddha accepted his gift, that he jumped about without paying proper attention and fell out of a tree and died. However, he was immediately reborn in the second level of heaven as a result of his generosity, which is pretty good going for a monkey. And the sort of happy ending for the story, apart from the monkey getting a better rebirth, is that the monks of Kosampi realized the Buddha was missing, and they renewed their vows to be unified and cooperate again. And the Buddha gave a teaching that this elephant lives alone in the forest, and in the absence of a proper partner, if you do not get associates with wisdom and high thoughts, it's better to live alone in this world, because having foolish associates will only increase your suffering. So those monks who had divided into two groups made up the differences, and they sent a representative to the Buddha to invite him to go back again into their city. And the elephant was also heartbroken to see the Buddha go, and followed him out of the forest. Yeah. Oh, and the elephant also died of grief, but I'm sure he went to a better place. Yes. Oh, he went to the second level of heaven as well. So the lesson of Madhu Purnima is that charity, service, and unity are essential for human life, and it's necessary to have mutual tolerance and establish unity, especially in the monastic community, which is the reason why we like to organize events where monks from many different temples come together. But on the Madhu Purnima in Bangladesh and so on, then often honey is brought to the temple to offer to the monks. And a joyous atmosphere prevails in the temples on those days. As for our own tradition, it's also a special day, as reflected in the special pattern of the candle lanterns that we have lit today, because it is a day when the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam, the founder of our tradition, rediscovered the Dhammakaya meditation tradition in his 12th year as a Buddhist monk, by discovering the body of enlightenment within himself. And I won't tell the whole story of the great abbot today, but I will tell it in brief about 3 times in the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam's life when he had a brush with death. The first time he imagined it. The second time it was forced on him. And the third time it was voluntary. Are you interested? Well, the first time, when I said it was imagined, was when he wasn't yet a monk, and he was making his way on a empty rice barge back through the rapids of a place called Bang Iten, where normally boat owners who had a lot of money with them, a lot of cash, would be very afraid of being robbed along the way. And generally they would travel in convoy to save being vulnerable. But that day he found himself alone with the boat and his crew. And at first he thought to himself, I better hide myself because they always will go for the captain first. So he hid himself, and then he thought better of it. He felt guilty for leaving his employees exposed, because really he should be the one who should take responsibility. So he went back and sat where he should have been, where it was clear that he was the captain, sort of the helmsman as it were. But that whole experience left him feeling that death is something that can be with us at any time. And he realized that really if death can come so easily, especially in even while earning one's living, then one ought to find a higher truth in life. And at that time he made the commitment to himself that as soon as he could make life secure for his family, he didn't have his own family, but he must look after his surviving mother and younger siblings, he would enter the monkhood. So his first imagined brush with death was the thing that made him, from an early age, decide to become a monk instead of following the normal life of a merchant. The second time was slightly more dramatic. This time someone really did turn up with a gun. Someone called Nairot. Yes, Mr. Survivor, if you translate from the Thailand. And because the temple at Wat Phra Nam in the old days was a bit of a sort of mafia hangout, they didn't like this new monk who was sort of cleaning things up around the temple. So one day when he was sitting like I am, giving a Dhamma talk, someone turned up in the audience and pulled a gun on him. And they shot a big bullet hole right through his robe, with a hole in the front of the robe and a hole in the back of the robe. But in between, it's like the bullet decided it didn't want to harm this monk. So he had 2 big holes in the robe, but nothing in the middle. And actually, they took his robe away and showed it in court and put Mr. Rod away in the prison. even though the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam turned up in court and said, well, he didn't do anything to me, all he did was shot me, but they still put him in prison. And unfortunately, he was let out of prison sometime later, but he went back to his old ways and didn't live much longer, unfortunately. So he faced death a second time, but this time miraculously escaped. Third time, intentionally, on the full moon day of September, in the 12th year of his monkhood, he decided that he had experimented enough with different sorts of meditation, but what was really needed was to try to meditate by putting his life on the line, let go of everything, including his attachment to life, by sitting for meditation all night, using the meditation method which he had managed to put together from many different sources available at the time. He knew about Samma Arahang. He knew about bringing the mind within, down the 7 bases. He didn't really know about the center of the body. And he certainly didn't know about bodies of enlightenment. He didn't know about spheres of the Dharma. But he sat for meditation during the day with the resolve that he wouldn't get up from his place until he could attain some part of what the Buddha himself knew of enlightenment and described in the scriptures, which seem to have been lost from history. And in the beginning, he was able to get a clear sphere of light at the center of himself, which was stable. And it stayed with him, but he realized there must be more. And later on, he sat well into the night, meditating further on the words Majjhima Patipata, which normally means the middle way or the way between 2 extremes. But he realized that there must be a more literal meaning to these words, Majjhima Patipata, which means that you must focus at the middle of what you have inside you. In which case he went through the center of the body, center of the center, and was able to discover a living body of enlightenment of the Buddha inside himself, which he came to know was called the Dhammakaya, as a sort of body of wisdom, which is actually within every person if they practice deeply enough. But because he had let go of everything in order to reach that point, then he was able to gain this knowledge and recover the knowledge of Dhammakaya for the world and be able to teach it. And we are now, in the present day, in the 3rd generation of his practice. So you could say the 10th of September, or the full moon day of September, it is like the anniversary of the rediscovery of our meditation tradition. So we remember it as such. So harvest moon, Madhu Purnima, mooncakes, and also the birthday of our meditation tradition, all in one today. If you enjoy meditation today, I would encourage you to meditate further. Sometimes we do all-nighters on the full moon day of the September, and normally we don't encourage it that much. We are not sort of meditating just to be macho about it, but if this is something that you like to do, then this would be a fruitful time for you to do it and think about the efforts made by the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam on this night 105 years ago. But for most people, a slightly more gentle approach would probably be appropriate. And if you're new to meditation, then I would encourage you to try to find 20 minutes a day to meditate and gradually build up on that if you can. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, whenever you have a time in the day when you are unlikely to be interrupted. In this respect, there is a MindGem app to help to remind you of the meditation technique, which has hundreds of different audio tracks leading meditation by all your favorite monks, which you can follow along with as you're meditating. And you can also time your practice as well, but that can be downloaded for free for iOS or Android onto your mobile phone. Also here in London, we have classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening now. Tuesday evenings a little bit shorter meditation, Thursday evenings a little bit longer, and those are also broadcast for those of you unable to come along in person. And on this Saturday period, it's something that happens weekly, not just on the full moons. The DMEU meditation has a series of monks who come on between 7 and 8 if you're on British time, between 8 and 9 if you are on European time, to give a meditation and a Dhamma talk every Saturday, which may be convenient for you, those of you who are meditating from home. And next weekend we have coming up our weekend retreat in London. There are still spaces on that. For anyone who would like to sign up, you can find the details on the meditationsurrey.com. It's a very reasonable price. Some people have said it's cheaper to come to meditate in the temple for the weekend than it is to heat their home at the moment. And last but not least, the next full moon meditation will be held on Tuesday the 10th of October. It will be held on the theme of the end of Buddhist Lent. So if you would like to join that in person or online, then you can see the Zoom coordinates there. So at this time, I think I've said everything I need to say. I'd like to hand back to Natalie, who can perhaps host any reflections, comments or feedback which anyone may have at this point.
Sadhu Chakalampi. So, it's a lovely evening. Anyone have any questions at all? Anyone from Zoom have any questions at all about this evening, or just to share any experience or to ask any things from our teaching monk for this evening? If not, I do have a few questions to ask. I find it very useful. If Dhammakaya tradition is so valuable, how did it get lost over time so that Luang Pu has to rediscover it to get back?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So most people think about things like wisdom teachings as being so valuable that they can almost exist eternally, like eternal truths, and you wouldn't think that people would forget them or lose touch with them. But what we sometimes forget is that all of these wisdoms have to be embodied in real, live, living people. And once those people pass on, if they are unable to pass on what they know to the next generation, then the teachings become more and more diluted or lost altogether. So if a person knows all these wonderful wisdom teachings, but they teach only half of what they know to the next generation, then the next generation knows only half. If that generation pass on only half of what they know to the next generation, then by the third generation only 25% form, until eventually people can't work out anymore what they mean. And even with Buddhism, a lot of the things we read in the scriptures which have been preserved in writing, we can't make sense of them. We see words in there, we can't imagine what they mean anymore. Things like the word Dhammakaya is actually in the Buddhist scriptures, but no one knew what it meant apart from thinking about the literal meaning. So this was why Luang Pu had to rediscover it, because he had to piece it back together again. And the sort of efforts he made where he was willing to put his life on the line was the sort of energy and inspiration which was needed to make that connection again after it had been lost probably since about 1,000 years after Buddha passed away. So it had been lost before that point for getting on for 2,000 years.
Sadhu Chaka. Yeah. Back then, we probably haven't got library or archive or anything like that. Things can get lost in transaction. So yeah, I seem to remember when I was little, my grandmother told me to meditate, but I don't understand what meditations mean. So I never asked, and she never explained, and that's it. So yeah, the second question is, what is the meaning of the writing on the candle in front of us here with the patterns that we see, kind of round patterns thing? What is the meaning of it? And then is it supposed to be like 4 elements?
So I'll backtrack to this picture again. We have our 4 elements. Actually, it's 6 elements if you count them all. We had some of them just now. Was it earth, wind, and fire, plus water. Yeah, earth, wind, and fire is usually easy, the 3 most easy to remember for some reason. So the 4 major elements which make up our body, make up everything basically, but none of those elements are living elements. In the middle there is the element of space, so that's number 5. And then in the middle of the element of space is the element of wisdom or knowledge. And in the old days with the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam, he said that around the center of our body, of course we've got the wisdom in there, but there's a space around the wisdom, and then each direction there are the 4 elements which can be seen in their essence as well. These days, in the modern way we practice meditation, we don't go into the 4 elements like that anymore, we just concentrate at the center. But sometimes we see also this writing, which is actually writing in the old Cambodian language called Khom, or Khmer. I mistakenly thought it was describing the 4 elements, but I looked on Google Translate. Interested to see what I found? And discovered that it says Samma Arahang. So the first one of the syllables says Sam, then Ma, and then Ara, and then Hang. So that's, if you see it with the writing, then that is what the writing means. But the symbol with the 4 or the 6 elements, that is what that pattern means, which we have lit for the candles today. Yes, and you'll see the same pattern actually on all the windows of the center we have here as well, which is the far-sightedness of the monks who built the temple. Yeah.
Sadhu Chaka. Of course.
I can find it out for you, but I can't remember offhand. Yes. But in essence, the way it's described is that all the elements are everywhere in your body. So it's not like, oh, it's your bladder or something in front, or your stomach. It's actually, there are the subtle elements, which you would see only with the mind. But the way these elements are understood, or they would be contemplated, generally speaking, is that they be contemplated like earth element would be all the solid parts of your body, water element would be all the fluid parts of your body. So your blood, your lymph fluid, that sort of thing. Fire would be the warmth in your body, and air would be the sort of the air in your body, yes.
Thank you, Chaka. Is there any more?
Bodies. So counting your physical body, there will be 17 on the inside. The last 10 of which would be Dhammakaya bodies. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very good questions. Yeah. So final questions for myself. Did the great abbots of Wat Phra Nam ever get any trouble with the authorities in the same way that Luang Por Dhammachayo is suffering in the present day, Chaka?
Yes, it's true that the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam did have some trouble with politics in his lifetime. He tried to avoid it as much as possible. But even so, during the end of his life, he still was restricted in what he could teach because there were certain authorities who favored particular other ways of practicing meditation in Thailand, especially the more sort of Burmese way of practicing. So it made life quite difficult for him. But this is something that happened generally in Thailand. The meditation we practice is sometimes known in Thailand as Boran Gammathan. It's like a whole series of very, very ancient practices, older than Thailand itself. You can trace it back to Cambodia and places like that, the way meditation was practiced. And sometimes along comes a particular member of the royal family and they favor only one sort of meditation and say, this is the true way and all the others are rubbish and don't let monks teach them anymore. And he got sort of prevented from teaching this meditation in much the same way. But it never got to the point where he wasn't allowed to appear in public anymore. But he did have some things which disturbed his ability to spread it more widely, especially in the final few years of his life.